having the wrong chat. What is the correct chat? Thank you, Heike. Heike just... did you get the link? Huh? Great, thank you very much. Thank you, Heike, for putting me right. For those of you who don't know who I am, my name is Marisa Constantinides. I am a teacher educator from Greece. I live in Athens, and I also have a little plot in Second Life, which I've had for 2 or 3 years now. And my ambition is to do something with it and to bring some teacher education in Second Life, not necessarily about Second Life only, but about more general methodology. And I have been training teachers of English for quite a long time. I think it's too long to tell you just exactly how long. My Second Life name is Marisoldi or Alana, and I was created in those days where you couldn't choose your name, but you chose names from a number of options, hence this very odd name. Now, those of you who are here, perhaps we could use a text chat. I know Carol and Hazel, and let me just have a look and see who else is here. And Osna, Dennis is here, and I don't know the young lady who's here, if she has been involved. Coco Leblanc, you have been involved in the Machinima workshop as well, right?
Yes, she has.
Okay, great, yes. I'm a little bit flustered because, you know, the technology and all that. I'm trying to kind of sort myself out, so I apologize if I didn't recognize everybody. I have a view of myself and my screen at the moment, and I'm going to talk first about, you know what a machinima is. But the techniques I'm going to show you can be used with any video that you want to use in class. So whether machinima or video clip or film clip, the techniques are good for all those types of film. But the machinima itself, we're going to look at the why, the what, the why, and how, which is quite normal in these presentations. And from Wikipedia, I got this definition, which seems to resonate with a lot of people. It's the use of real-time computer graphics engines to create cinematic productions. So basically, we're looking at filming in virtual worlds, creating a sequence, creating a story, creating moving images to use for language, for entertainment primarily, but we've been looking at potential for language teaching. I don't think I need to preach to the converted, and my audience is the converted audience, but some of the ways that seemed important to me to mention was the ability to control your content, which sometimes you cannot control with authentic material that you find on the internet. Sometimes you don't have enough time to find the right material, even if you scroll and kind of view hours and hours of YouTube clips and so on and so forth. The language controls that you can impose on the material itself, which again, it's very difficult if you want to do specific things with language. I think the motivation and engagement of students with the visual and moving motion element of machinima. I also think it's a wonderful source of comprehensible input that can generate more naturalistic language acquisition. And last but not least, perhaps it would be a good idea to mention modality preference. We do have learners who are very highly auditory and very good learners they are, but through the simple use of non-visual audio or audio without visual support. And we don't cater to our visual learners, and we make it just that much more difficult for them to process language, to interpret language in context. The absence of context makes Machinima so attractive. I'm going to look at three kinds of how, and these are very, very general hows. I'm going to be looking at issues relating to how to use Machinima for language input, and by language input I mean grammatical structures, vocabulary, lexical items, lexical chunks. I mean language functions, I mean pronunciation, even discourse elements related to spoken language, such as turn taking and moves and intonation and stress and stuff like that. I'm going to be looking at it as a way of providing receptive skills practice, primarily listening, which is supported by the visual element, but we're also going to be looking at using Machinima for receptive skills work and for productive skills work. So our lesson objectives, if you like, would be generally of three kinds. Machinima as a tool, as a vehicle for language input. Machinima as a tool for receptive skills work, primarily listening, and to generate speaking and writing production from our learners. I'm talking here about fairly general lesson objectives. So there are three functions that I can see to a Machinima or to a short video clip in general, that you can use it to provide language as a model for learners to acquire and to emulate, to imitate. And you can use a Machinima as a prompt, and by prompt I mean in the broader general sense, to prompt to generate language production, not in the sense of prompt for drilling purposes. And those two functions of a Machinima are very useful ones to the language teacher, and normally the Machinima of that serving those purposes would be teacher created, teacher generated. But there's also another kind of Machinima that you can look at, that is, the Machinima is the end product itself, and that kind of Machinima is student created. So the Machinima and the language production involved is the process of creating the Machinima itself. The language output of the learners is the negotiation, the problem-solving skills that they need to exercise in order to produce a Machinima themselves. Are there any questions so far? Do you have any comments that you would like to make? Are you following my voice okay? Is my sound level all right?
Sound is great.
It's beautiful. It's wonderful. Yeah. Perfect.
Thank you very much. Okay. Please feel free to make any comments. I've now managed to negotiate leaving the chat open as well, so I can look at your comment, which is I'm sorry I hadn't put that out before. I could see stray comments here and there.
Yeah, I'm really sorry, Marisa. I had to go off because visited, so I needed to get him banned on both islands.
Okay,
So I disappeared, but I'm back.
All right. I'm mostly going to work today with teacher-generated Machinima and look at some considerations that I think are important for teachers, for educators in general, to consider. Because we're looking at Machinima for language teaching purposes, but I think Machinima is a wonderful tool to use not only in the narrow sense of language input, but it could also teach content. For example, in the production of films that we saw, Machinima that we saw yesterday. I tend to say Machinimas as plural, but I've been corrected several times. That Machinima is also the plural. Anyway, somebody, I think Almut and her group produced a Machinima that was talking about Second Life itself. So that was teaching some subject matter. It was teaching content to the learners, through which they could be acquiring some language. So this type of film is also good for content-generated, content-related teaching. So if you have classes that you want to teach English through geography, culture through and English at the same time, Machinima seems to be a fairly good vehicle for that. Some of the considerations that some of you will be familiar with are the length of the production in minutes. And there's a whole gamut. I mean, there's a Machinima of a few seconds, of 1 minute, versus Machinimas that are longer and possibly even more than 10 minutes. What are your feelings about the ideal length? I think I've asked this question before, and I know some of your answers, but for the sake of the recording, perhaps, if you don't mind, type your answer till 3 minutes. Yeah?
3 at the most.
3 at the most. Yeah, I tend to agree with short length clips because, first of all, it's a great, it's a lot of work for the teacher to produce something that is such a major production. And 10 minutes is like, Spielberg production to me. Long clips get boring, as Letty points out. They can be very interesting if you handle them in the right way, just like a long film would be interesting if you exploited it in the appropriate way. With longer clips, Coco suggests you would have to include clips for comprehension. I think Osna's first was 16 minutes. That was the story of your life, or an epic saga. Yeah, I think comprehension questions for me are a must for any type of 1 minute, 2 minute, 5 minute, 6 minute, 10 minute clip. To me, it's a given that at some point you're going to check your learner's comprehension. But I think with longer clips, you can chop them up into smaller sections and handle different sections in different ways, pausing and so on, encouraging further prediction, etc. So if you have a longer machinima, perhaps it might be a good idea to think of transition points where you might pause it to generate discussion, further prediction, maybe imagining, getting the students to imagine. Yeah, exactly. Getting the students to imagine how it's going to continue. In some cases, yeah, okay, Coco, I didn't understand what you were saying. With a pause then, and very often you can even just pause it and ask the students to predict who is going to speak next and what do you think they're going to say. This is wonderful prediction, practice and engagement, involvement in the action of the machinima, and gets the students to think, to do ongoing prediction, which facilitates listening and processing of the spoken message. The number of characters is also another issue which some of you will have had to negotiate in creating your machinima. And generally, unless you've got, I tend to go for smaller crowds. First of all, it's easier to find enough, to find colleagues who are going to come and help you. If you need 25 people, it's kind of very difficult to mobilize so many people unless you're running around like a chicken without a head or like a really dervish pretending to be 32 different avatars and then trying to patch it all up. You know, a small number of characters, simple actions, you know, it's great. If you do need to use more characters, sometimes I get lost in the in the story because, you know, I get confused. With who is doing what. So it's a good idea to prime the learners before a sequence like that involves many characters, and provide them perhaps with character profiles. For example, in this particular story that one of our colleagues created, Barbara Novelli, it's quite a complicated story, and every time I watch it I forget who's doing what. That's because I'm not a learner, obviously, and I don't have Barbara as my, who I'm sure is a wonderful teacher. I'm not doing it in class. But I would suggest that perhaps it's a good idea to have some kind of stage where you familiarize your learners with the characters in a very simple way. I think it's Mr. Prophet's Demise, number 2. And it's in one of the handouts. One good suggestion is to label them, to screenshot maybe a still where they appear, or to do a patchwork of stills, as I did from Barbara's story, from Barbara's Machinima, and to use labeling. You can do that in any picture editor. Even the simplest picture editor will put text on a JPEG or a PNG or something, and give the students some background. Who is each character, so they remember? Because if they have to answer complicated comprehension questions about these characters, they have to know who was what and who did what. I think also one thing that I possibly have already mentioned, so I'm going to kind of gloss over it quite quickly, is the time and effort you expend on creating such a production. I know that while you're learning the tools of the trade, it takes quite a long time to get your act together, and I've been there and done it, and some of you and you have been much more actively involved in your own productions than myself. You know how long it takes to produce the shortest of machinimas. So consider your own preparation time as a teacher. Consider the effort that you put in. I know that you kind of justify to yourselves, and you say, well, if I create it, I can use it again and again. But just consider the fact that you may be thrilled with the creative potential, with the creative stimulation that creating the machinima gives you. It gives you a good rush. It makes you feel creative as a teacher, and that's absolutely wonderful. But don't get carried away. You have a life as well, and putting in 15 hours of preparation for something which is going to last 2 minutes, and then you might never use it again with another class, is not a very good idea. You really need to consider to plan it carefully, to plan it so that it's time efficient for you as well, because from my experience, teachers are not actually paid for the preparation time. You wanted to do a perfect machinima, Letty. Can I just say that forget the illusion of the perfect machinima. Just like I think in my experience, if I draw 3 silly figures on the board and they vaguely look like people doing what I want them to look like, my students are thrilled. And sometimes they laugh, and that laughter is even better. You know?
See my drawing as well.
Well, exactly. My drawings on my board don't have to be perfect for my students to appreciate the fact that I'm trying to get them to visualize something. So don't expect your machinimas to be perfect. If they have the basic elements, the basic ingredients that you need to highlight, to showcase the situation, to highlight language, I think that's fine. Of course my students love me, that I'm a professional. Like all professional teachers, I respond to my students. I'm sure they adore you, Letty, because I've seen you in action with your learners. It's my job to do this. It's not that I'm lovable, but I really, teachers do that. It's our job to create a good atmosphere in our classrooms. So the time and effort are important. The other thing that you really need to consider is your focus, the aim of your machinima. Again, don't get carried away with the creative rush of, I want to make a film. Think about your syllabus, think about your target language. Mostly dislike you. I doubt it. I doubt it. They will remember you with longing, Coco, and say that was the teacher that made us work. It's my experience. It is my experience. Students like a firm teacher. They don't like permissive teachers. I swear to you, you will be up there in their Hall of Fame one day. But when you find out, it's going to be too late. Give them back some love. So decide, is your focus language? Is your objective to practice listening skills, to use the machinima as a springboard for speaking, for writing, possibly even for further reading, because if you use the machinima as a springboard for something, it could lead the students to writing, and in order to write, they might go and look up some different texts of a similar genre and analyze them and look at them. So it can be, but you really need to decide. And is it going to be a mixture? In reality, as perhaps a teacher and teacher educator, I would, who has seen hundreds of lessons taught by very good teachers, I would suggest to you that I have never seen a skills lesson that did not have a very clear language focus at some point. It's a consideration you really need to think about. Students don't come to our classes just to become better readers. They come to our classes because they want to learn language. So at some point, we really need to give them some language as well. So I would suggest that with any skills lesson, you should decide what is your language focus and at what point you're going to focus on that. Because this material is not authentic in the sense that it's something you create or the students create, the choice of language is quite significant. It's not going to be authentic, so you've got to be very careful that it doesn't sound contrived. And here I would suggest that teachers need to be need to sharpen up, to hone up their skills as language experts, and to be very aware of the sociolinguistic appropriacy of what they're including, that they are using the right language functions. It's not just grammatical accuracy, which we can all do very well. But we also need to consider, would native speakers in their right minds, in the real world, say something like that? Or am I just saying it to highlight a language point? But native speakers would never talk like that. So it's important for you to be aware of real language use and to include realistic, naturalistic stretches of language, articulated at the right speed not in slow, convoluted, easy to understand kind of language, which, some teachers think it facilitates listening, but in reality it makes the teacher dependent. Students need to be able to understand naturally spoken language, and that should be what we choose to include. Some language controls might be desirable, and this is why Machinima is so appropriate for the language classroom, because you can control language. I can hear a little birdie in the background. It's chirping away very happily. It sounds as if my presentation is making everyone happy, and it's like a heavenly atmosphere, and my audience is sitting back listening to me ecstatically. This is not the case at all, I assure anyone who's listening online. And it's just the sounds in the background.
Can we just try and get Anne in front of you, Marisa? Oh, she's coming.
Yes, it's coming.
Just right click on her seat, Anne.
Hello.
I'm trying to see the front of you, but I can only see the back of you, Marisa.
Okay, I'll try to turn around.
Yeah, wow. Yeah.
I lost myself. Now I have to do a complete 180% turn to come back to my slides, and I've lost them. Good Lord. Where are my slides? I've lost them now.
Behind you.
I know, but I need to come back in. Oh yeah, okay, I got them. All right. I'm going to point at something else as I speak, so that I don't always seem to be looking at the board. I'm looking at you now, aren't I?
Yes, you're looking at us. No, at the moment you're looking at us sometimes.
No.
But you're not showing your back, so that's a great shame.
Thank you very much. It's something that I would tell my teachers off, stop looking at the board, look at your students. Thank you very much, Letty, for letting me know. That sounded like letting me know, Letty me know.
Letty, forget Letty.
So, what about language controls? I would suggest, yes, have very, very sharp and strong language controls. If you're using your little sequence, your Machinima, to highlight language, to showcase grammatical structure or items of vocabulary or functional items. But the 70% refers to what you achieve if you are very careful with the language surrounding the language that you want to highlight. If the students don't have to worry about any other unknown language items, you're maximizing their chances of acquisition by about 70%. If you're not, you're minimizing their, if they have to worry about other unknown vocabulary, idiomatic phrases, which maybe make the particular piece sound authentic and exciting, they might get confused. Fewer language controls if you're using video or Machinima for listening skills development. But Machinima itself, the visual element, the action, the movements, they make the text, the speech, more comprehensible, obviously. And that's why we use it, because the features of the environment and the actions of the people facilitate language processing. So it's not so significant to have language controls if you're using. Oops, I've lost myself. Good Lord, where am I? Okay, hang on a minute. I've got to turn me around as well. Okay, here I am. Sorry about that. Okay. The other thing is that should you use explanations and grammatical? I turned around and I'm looking at the wall now, but what can I do? I don't want to lose myself again. Grammatical explanations and big charts and diagrams and that and rules. Okay, I think some teachers like that, and nothing I will say will convince them that this is not a good idea. My own personal feeling is that Machinima as a tool for visual, creative and naturalistic samples of use of language is not a grammar book. Grammar books do that. We do that in the classroom. You can put up your boards, your substitution tables, your timelines, your rule discovery exercises. You can put them up on the board, you can put them on a handout, you can put them on a slide presentation. But I think Machinima should have the features of a filmed sequence of an episode. It should be people doing things, people acting in situations, people reacting to other people, and communicating in a way that resembles communication in the real world. Something else that you might want to consider is text and speech bubbles. There are advantages that some people find in using speech bubbles and text, for example, subtitles. And I have turned completely around again, and I'm really embarrassed. Okay, is that better?
Yeah.
Absolutely fine, Marisa. You're perfect.
This is giving me no end of angst.
Don't worry. Don't worry. I should have put a browser view at the other end for you as well.
I think, I should have duplicated my slides actually. That would have been perfect. But who would have been clicking them? Do you imagine me clicking both browsers? That would have been me confused.
Oh, Carol. Carol is the best clicker here in the world. She's been clicking along all through languages,
Seems like it.
Okay, some of the advantages are that people say, well, the speech bubbles or the subtitles or whatever, they can help visual learners. It makes listening to accents easier. It gives the opportunity to explore new vocabulary and that. And these are good points. But I think for me, written language on a Machinima is a tad unnatural. I don't find that is the intended use of the medium. Okay, in the real world, we also see subtitled movies, but not if you're a hearing person. Okay, I think, Letty, I know you have a different view, but I have a different view as well. I think if I were to make a Machinima that I wanted to have subtitles or speech bubbles that are completed, I would probably make a copy of my original one, or I would intersperse bubbled and unbubbled scenes of the same one. No, I'm not saying they do. No, they have some really lovely ones without any evidence of subtitles at all. So I'm just saying that the first contact with language through a Machinima should be without text, because listening and reading at the same time makes students text dependent. Just like I would never advocate teaching listening through reading, or teaching the learners to listen to a story by also reading the text at the same time, because it doesn't develop the reading skills. In the same way, I would suggest that the purpose of the Machinima is to showcase language through auditory input with visual support. And secondarily, just like we do with perhaps listening to an audio tape or an audio track, in the classroom, we tend to exploit it without the transcript, but at a later point in the lesson, we might show the transcript for language exploration. If the instructions are to be spoken, they should be understood as spoken. If they are to be written, then I wouldn't make a machinima. I would give them a text with images. Yeah. I think Osna has a point. It's the good old days of language laboratories and drilling and killing. Nothing should be spoken before it has been heard, and nothing should be written before it has been read, was the saying of the good old Louis Alexander. It has not been completely overthrown as a statement, because we understand now that in order to produce written language, you've got to read, you've got to be exposed to loads and loads of text. In order to be able to speak, the child listens to masses and masses of auditory input from the parents, and they don't have subtitles or speech bubbles next to their mother's head. Yeah, okay, adult learners, older learners don't have so many hours of input. So I'm just saying that text does not facilitate, does not make better listeners, does not work for language acquisition. It is useful for later stages in the lesson if you want to use it. Just like I would give out a transcript to my learners after listening to an audio text, they've listened to it 2 or 3 times. Now it's time to listen and highlight, for example, intonation contours, sound linking points. It's a good time to find some functional phrases. You use it for language focus and for language exploration. Rules and explanations, yes, if you're using something for self-access or for a revision. And again, I would just only put something like that at the end. Yeah. And English is notorious for that, Osna, for this huge mismatch between pronunciation, orthography, and phonology. Psychology and pseudo is, which I must say are Greek words, unlike the father in my big fat Greek wedding. Every word comes from the Greek.
It's your fault. It's your fault. It's all your fault.
It's not our fault you cannot pronounce our language, Carol, and that you had destroyed this beautiful Greek language. Don't get my back up, please. Okay, so rules and explanations only if you're sending something for self-access. Again, my personal preference would be not to put this on the machinima itself. I'd best put it on a separate worksheet, give it as part of something else. I wouldn't do it if I was using the machinima in class. I would keep it separate. I would do it on the board. I would do it on a handout. I wouldn't put it on the film. I don't know if you agree with me. Oops, sorry, I lost that. Some typical classroom techniques that you may be familiar with. I don't think I'm reinventing the wheel here. You will be familiar with the concept of playing the machinima with sound off. Yeah? First you play, the students predict the action. You can get them to imagine what the characters are saying. You can even ask them to act it out from, the action in the sequence, and to act out the lines. You can freeze frame and stop the action. Remember we talked about pauses earlier, and you ask them for further predictions. What do you think is going to happen next? Which character is going to speak? What are they going to say? how do you think they're going to say it even? Do you think they're going to be angry? Do you think they're going to be, do you think they're going to apologize, to invite, and so on and so forth? You can play with the sound off and just watch the images. I don't know why I said that, because I've said that earlier. It's obviously a mistake in the slides. You can just, I meant just play with the sound off. You just play the sound, but not watch the images. You can play the sound and have the students imagine the images. I apologize for that mistake. Okay? Some other ideas from the techniques toolkit, like you can give them speech bubbles to complete. You can give them allow partial viewing. You can cover up half the screen. You can do back-to-back viewing. One person is viewing, is watching the screen. The other person is just listening, and they tell the other how they imagine the action to be. The normal gamut of activities that you can use for any good listening lesson is good for this. You can do gap fills, you can give them images to order, you can give them sentences to order, events, true and false, and so on and so forth. Any techniques that you know as a good listening skills teacher are good for Machinima and for any kind of video. Finally, I want to come to the idea of lesson shapes. Lesson shapes can be used, seen receptively, and you can use the presentation practice production model, particularly useful for low levels of instruction, or the students don't have enough language to experiment with, where you might present something, highlight it, get them to notice how the language was used, then lead them to acting it out, to control practice activities before they produce similar language. You can use the pre-while post model for skills development, before they watch, while they watch, post-watching activities. You can use a task-based model of learning. The students are given the situation, they are told about the characters, they may be given some ideas or some vocabulary from the action or some phrases, and they can be asked to recreate the language, to imagine the story, to write dialogue lines, to act out dialogue lines before they actually watch the Machinima. In staging receptive work, the usual while post-viewing model would have the following purposes. You would be doing various previewing activities to tap their background knowledge, to stimulate interest. If necessary, to teach some key vocabulary, to give them a purpose for viewing, to encourage them to predict and anticipate, which is key in these things like that. Because no matter how excited we are by our creations, we teachers tend to be sometimes as naive as children who just love what we do, and we find this wonderful song, and we find this little wonderful film, and we go to class and we are met with blank faces. Students need their curiosity, we need to stimulate their curiosity. We need to get them to guess, to predict, to anticipate, to make a personal investment. Because human nature being what it is, they want to prove themselves right. And if you've got them guessing, they want to prove themselves right. And the only way they can do this is by watching a Machinima, listening to the audio or whatever. While they're viewing, I would suggest maybe a sequence that goes from the top down rather from bottom up processing. Don't look at the language immediately. Don't look at details of how this and that word was used or pronounced, but focus on the basic context, on the plot, on the characters, just the gist, the general main points of the story, facts, rather than great implications and innuendos. You can do those later, and only very later focus on the language itself. For post viewing, encourage reaction to the video, encourage practice of certain items of language that were used in the video in the Machinima, and get them to consolidate the language, whether you were using it as a language showcase or as a skills development activity. The students need to go away having learned something, used something, take something home. Student-generated machinima is also a wonderful way at consolidating and creating productive work in the learners, and it's a wonderful vehicle for project-based learning, where the students can decide, you can assign a project, or they can choose a project. The shapes of lessons that you can follow there are not very different. You might have a little text as an instruction or leaflet or instructions on the situation or some kind of input to react to. For example, productively, they might have read a short story, and you might ask them to choose a scene from the story to dramatize. They might listen to a coursebook dialogue, and you, which is quite controlled in terms of language, and you might ask them to act it out and to dramatize it using this tool. You could use TBL sequences, as I described earlier, by giving the situation, some language, ideas, some prompts, some cues for the students to generate their own dialogues, their own stories, before they hear the input from the machinima itself. Finally, I just want to conclude with one of the things that machinima is quite good for. It's very good for generating various cognitive processes which are involved in Bloom's taxonomy. And this is the revised taxonomy which includes some of the new Web 2 or Web 2.0 tools for the various levels of thinking skills involved. And remember that remembering and understanding may be considered low-level thinking skills, but they are crucial to learning as well. They are not to be sneered at because they are considered to be low-level skills. Without understanding and remembering, you cannot create, you cannot analyze, you cannot evaluate. But without some evaluation and creation, you cannot assimilate language. And I think I've also added Second Life here and machinima as a tool at the top of the creative Bloom's taxonomy, because it is a tool that promotes and encourages, enhances creativity. And if you look at the top of the hierarchy, from the top down, we go into the higher order thinking skills, designing, constructing, planning, producing, inventing, devising, making, filming, animating. They are at the top order. They are the highest order thinking skills in Bloom's taxonomy. So creativity and imagination are key, because the creative potential in our learners, if we cultivate it and develop it, it enhances language use. And language use in turn, creative language use enhances and improves our creative thinking potential, because language is, after all, the most creative human activity from a limited, finite number of lexical items. We can create millions and trillions of never duplicated phrases in our lifetime. It's potentially possible that we may never articulate the same utterance twice. And this type of work generates lateral thinking, flexible thinking, productivity, originality, and independence of view. It's problem-solving oriented. In a problem-solving oriented classroom, I think machinima, film creation, film editing, film writing, screenplay writing have a very important place, a very important role. Some of the dimensions of creativity have been identified from education, from an educational point of view, from a psychology point of view, and from the business world, which is very interested in creativity for reasons of marketing, of course, not for innocent reasons. But there's been a lot of research they've done which benefits education, and some of the qualities of people who are creative have been identified, and I have chosen the main 4 parameters which I think resonate very highly to language educators. The concept of fluency, flexibility, elaboration, and originality. And fluency is not what we understand as fluency in speech, but it's the generation, the production of many ideas. Creative thinkers are prolific producers of ideas. They're not all very good ideas, but they have lots of ideas. They are flexible thinkers. They are not stuck to a single point of view, but they can look at a problem and look at different solutions and look at different ways of dealing and approaching it. They are good elaborators. Lots of wonderful new ideas are elaborations of old ideas that somebody picked up, developed, and created something new and wonderful. And lastly, they are original. They are new ideas, but not necessarily because they're completely novel. They can be original because somebody looked at an old problem in a new way and elaborated in a fresh way that made it more creative or more useful to us. With a language teacher, creative behaviors can be very, very well associated with language skills and language production. In terms of creative behaviors, on the left-hand column, fluency is seen as the ability to produce large quantity of ideas. As I said, not all very good ideas, but large quantities. In terms of language production, it's been identified as easy and ready flow of talk, and it's the production of sustained talk. People who talk very little are not considered fluent. So some quantity of talk is required for people to be considered fluent, eloquent speakers. Flexibility relates to the ability to produce diverse ideas, not the same kind. And in language production, the ability to follow and respond to changes in the conversation, something which the audiolingual method, for example, did not anticipate and did not encourage. You were supposed to learn the pattern and use the same pattern. But in reality, fluent speakers can follow any change in the direction of the talk. And also, they can change direction in the talk themselves. Elaboration is the ability to add on to and embellish an already existing idea. And Machinima offers a wonderful potential for the ability to create, particularly because you can take a simple dialogue and embellish it through images and context. Oops, I've lost my slides. Got them. The ability to improve set phrases. It's a very useful skill for writing, for taking a very simplistic text and blowing it up and elaborating, embellishing it. And finally, the ability to produce uncommon and clever ideas in terms of language production. It's the ability to produce novel utterances, to avoid cliches, to be able to generate language from language. So that's all I wanted to say. I think Machinima is a wonderful tool for language educators. It's not just a language vehicle. It's not just a vehicle for showcasing language. It's a vehicle for developing thinking skills, creative thinking skills in our learners, for stimulating their imagination, for motivating them, but also for motivating teachers who are, they also need an occasional injection of creativity, of imagination and of things that are out of the mainstream of teaching, because our job is very difficult and we need to be engaged as well. Thank you very much for coming and for listening. And if you have any questions, I'd be very happy to answer them. And I can now turn around and look at you properly, because I couldn't look at you before. Okay. Any comments? Any noises? Thank you, Hazel.
A very positive noise. It was brilliant, Marisa. It was really, really great. Thank you.
Oh, this is a lovely comment. Thank you so much. Okay.
The recording now.
Thank you. Okay, I'll just put in the link again in the text chat in case somebody missed it. You can download everything,